The base is dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down Here. It's December 13th. It's Friday the 13th. It's a cold, rainy Friday the 13th in Atlanta. I'm Jason Longshore. John Nelson is busy at a cold and rainy venue known as Georgia State Stadium for the Georgia High School Football Championships all day today, all day tomorrow. It is a long process for our friend John. So he is not with us this morning. Drafted in Jessica Charman to fill in the next segment, next couple of segments, actually. So if you have any questions specifically for Jess, throw them at us on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. The Friday flashback topic is based off of the news up in Charlotte. And we keep getting news out of Charlotte. This has been a very Charlotte-centric show here lately. We saw the trademarked names, the submitted trademarks for names anyway, earlier in the week. Well, Ian Thomas of Front Office Sport is reporting that Charlottetown FC is expected to be the choice for Charlotte's MLS team name. Now, Ian Thomas says, "Let me just say this, there are still a number of things up in the air regarding the club, so while a name is far from 100% confirmed / locked in at the moment, this is the clubhouse leader." We talked about these when they first came across late last week, and Charlottetown, for whatever reason, and there's really honestly no logic to it for me, Charlottetown FC was the one that I liked, along with Carolina Gliders. It was the one that, for some reason, sounded okay. It sounded good. One quibble, I don't really care about the FC or SC part of it. I know that it gets added on to everything now, and I think at times it gets used, at times it doesn't. I mean, obviously, in a FC Dallas or Toronto FC situation, that's a different conversation. I do think it adds a lot of confusion for mainstream sports outlets who don't understand the naming conventions, because I see things like Sounders FC at times, and it's like, no, nobody calls them that. That's not how it works. Now, the Columbus Crew, when they rebranded, and this is the logo change and a little bit of their branding changes that they did, about 5 years ago now, they did tell people to refer to them as Crew SC. Why? I never understood that. It's incredibly awkward and just clunky, and it doesn't make sense in the way that we talk about sports in this country. It doesn't make sense the way that anybody talks about these teams. Like, it doesn't happen that way. So tacking on the FC or the SC, is it completely necessary? I don't think so. I definitely think it's unnecessary when you're talking about the team in a conversational sense. You know, if we're going to talk about Charlottetown, we're going to talk about Charlottetown. It's not Town FC. Who knows? They might come up with something that makes me change my mind on that, but I'm going to go with no. So the Friday Flashback topic is best and worst, and you're probably going to need to specify in some of these because people do have differing opinions. Best and worst team names in American soccer history. You go back in the day, and there's been some bad ones. I'm in the midst of a research project right now about the beginnings of pro soccer in the modern era, anyway, in the United States. Going back to the beginnings in 1967 and all the lead up into that. And you had at that time, it started with 3 different groups trying to form a league, and then it turned into 2 because 2 of them merged. And in Los Angeles, for example, you had one group that was going to be known as the Los Angeles Toros. Okay. That's all right. I mean, this is 1966 we're talking about when this team was named. So The Toros, okay, I can roll with that. Well, the other team across town, they ended up not going with this, but the other team across town was going to be known as the Los Angeles Zorros. So, yeah, you had a lot of competition within cities, and if you had a Toros and a Zorros in the same city, can only imagine. And the Zorros idea, like I can only imagine what the logo was going to look like too. That could have gotten completely out of hand. In Atlanta, we've had some interesting team names in our soccer history, and we know about the Atlanta Chiefs, obviously playing off of the Braves connection. The Apollos was the team that was owned by the Omni Group, which owned the Hawks and the NHL Flames at the time in the 70s, only lasted 1 year. When professional soccer came back, you had the Chiefs, but the team name that we've mentioned on the show before, and it's one that not many people know about. It's something that I'm going to have to dig deeper into. There's a couple potential interviews might be able to drill into this story a little bit more. But I've been writing over at soccerdownhere.net about the time frame between the Apollos folding and the second Chiefs coming back. Because I think a lot of times we zero in on the beginning of the Chiefs and the championship in 1968, but a lot of the seeds that they planted really came to the fore in the 70s. Well, there was an indoor team. There were a few different indoor leagues that were all sprouting up at the same time, and one got so far as to announce a team for Atlanta and announce a team name. And an indoor soccer team in Atlanta that was supposed to start that never did. The league didn't get off the ground. It folded before it started. The Atlanta team name was going to be the Atlanta Wallbangers. Just one of the greatest team names in the history of sports. I wish it had happened. I wish we had seen a logo. Very cool shirt that the guys up at Marvel Soccer created. MarvelSoccer.com, if you haven't followed them, and check them out on social media. But they did a shirt with a recreation of what the Atlanta Wallbangers logo could have looked like in 1978. It's pretty good. I could definitely have seen this happening. When you get past the second version of the Chiefs, you had the Georgia Generals. Okay, I kind of get it. I don't know if the soldier dressed up in the gray army outfit would have worked so well. That was on the sidelines. Yeah, probably. It was 1982. Star Spangled Soccer was their tagline, too, which is pretty awesome. You had a series of teams after the Atlanta attack who played in what is now the USL, but at that time was the USISL. You had a Gwinnett County Steamers playing off for the Brookwood Steamers Youth Club. You had the Atlanta Express. You had an Atlanta Quicksilver. The one that lasted for a good while in the USISL was the Atlanta Magic. Great indoor team that won 3 straight titles and won like 40 games in a row. A lot of those players went on to join the Atlanta Ruckus. And that was the first team that I followed day in and day out and got to see almost every match that the Ruckus played, at least in Atlanta. And Ruckus it's an interesting one. It's a unique one. I don't think it would fly these days, but it, in 1995, did it work? I loved it, but it was also the first team I had a chance to love like that, so maybe I was a little biased. The shirts that had on the back, just a tough bunch of ruckers. Don't know if that branding is going to work anymore either. After that, you had the Atlanta Silverbacks, and the Silverbacks were named for Willie B., the silverback gorilla at the Atlanta Zoo. Very famous if you grew up in Atlanta around my time, and everybody knew who Willie B. was. So that was a team name that I think if you knew the history, it made sense. If you didn't, and you were outside the city, maybe it wasn't one that you liked. You can take it or leave it with some different team names. I think there's some that, depending on who you talk to, they would be in the best side and they would be in the worst side. I don't know if there's always a consistent thing here. What I've noticed here lately, and this is what's been interesting to me as the soccer conversation has changed, it feels like we went through a stretch where if you look at the original MLS team names, and you're talking Dallas Burn, you're talking Kansas City Wiz, yeah, that's on a lot of people's worst list. You're talking San Jose Clash and Tampa Bay Mutiny. It felt very skateboard culture. It felt very extreme. It felt like that. Then it turned to, okay, let's be super traditional and let's have, Toronto FC, let's have FC Dallas, let's get, you had DC United at the beginning, but then you get, a New York City, then you get an Atlanta United, then you get a Minnesota United. You start to get more of a traditional feel to team names, and there's a lot of value in that. I've said it many times. Something that struck me when people were complaining about the idea of calling the team Atlanta United was talking to people who didn't grow up in a soccer culture and were excited about the team, and they loved the name because it sounded like a soccer team to them. It didn't sound like something else. That's important. I think at times when it was trying to be very different, soccer team names had a feel like arena football, like minor league hockey. It was almost trying too hard. There were lots of X's and Z's in team names, and those days are ones that I would like to forget. This conversation came up with Tulsa in the USL Championship and their decision to rebrand as FC Tulsa as opposed to the Tulsa Roughnecks. I kind of loved the Tulsa Roughnecks name. I think it did have a lot of value in Tulsa. The rebrand has grown on me. It absolutely has. I did not like it at first because I liked the idea of the Roughnecks name and the history of that. I guess my question would be for people in Oklahoma, and we do have some listeners in Oklahoma. I've had some great conversations this morning with people outside the metro Atlanta area who listen on a regular basis. But did the Roughnecks name have the same kind of value as the Portland Timbers, as the Seattle Sounders, as the Vancouver Whitecaps, as the San Jose Earthquakes, as the New York Cosmos, as names that have history attached to them? Now, I know the Cosmos are a little bit different conversation, but San Jose decided to go back to the Earthquakes name after starting as the Clash in MLS. Vancouver Whitecaps went to the Whitecaps name in their USL days after that club originally started as the Vancouver 86ers, which is the year that they started in the old Canadian Soccer League. Portland had a couple of different teams that went through different names before they came back to the Timbers name when they relaunched in the USL. You had, the Western Soccer Alliance and other leagues, and there were different Portland teams. I think there was an FC Portland in the late 80s. They embraced the Timbers history and went back to the original badge, and that's important. Seattle Sounders, remember at first, Seattle was going to go a different way with their MLS team name, and it was the people in Seattle who said, no, we're not having this. It's got to be the Sounders. Change the logo, change some things to it, but it's the Seattle Sounders. That name has value. Did the Tulsa Roughnecks have that kind of value? Not every city has that. You've had some teams, and one that did last for a long time that I've always wondered if they would ever incorporate elements of the branding back into Dallas. The Dallas Tornado. They were the original NASL team in Dallas, Texas, and they were the longest-running North American Soccer League team from 1967 until 1981. They were the one that survived the beginning. The rough stages kept going through the early 70s. That's where the Chiefs originally folded, and then did get into the boom years and then the bust years right after the boom years because it was an immediate turn. Dallas Tornado is a name that has a lot of historical value, I think. I wonder if it still does in Dallas. I wonder if it resonated that much. I remember it because they were, masterful with their branding and putting the Dallas Tornado logo and branding on foosball tables everywhere. It was, I think they changed the colors, if I'm not mistaken, but it was the Tornado logo, or at least a very good knockoff. That was how I first knew of the Dallas Tornado. After the team had folded, when I discovered soccer and was like, what is this table? What is this? Because I'd played the hockey games like that, and I didn't know what foosball was. And it had the Tornado logo on it. Is that one that could ever have some value to come back? it's an interesting time now where we're getting, I think, almost a pushback on the traditional names. And there was a lot of talk when you looked at the list of potential team names for Charlotte. Charlotte FC, a lot of people were like, no, we don't need that. Charlotte Athletic, a lot of people were like, no, we don't want that. Charlottetown, there were people who said they didn't want it. I kind of like it. I don't know why. I really don't know why, but it's different. I'm cool with it. It's different for the United States anyway. But now it's kind of going back, so we want something different. Does you have to have a mascot? Does it have to have a mascot to it? Does it have to have something easily attached to it? I want to see how they brand it, because that's going to be the ultimate determination here of how it works, is how it's branded, what the colors look like, what the logo looks like, what the feel is, how the supporters in Charlotte and surrounding areas embrace it. I'm intrigued, but I want to see going forward. All right, St. Louis is going to have a team name. Don't know where that's going to go. There's really nothing from history that would point you in a specific direction unless you're going to go the MISL St. Louis Steamers. I think the St. Louis Stars were the NASL team. The Steamers, maybe you want to go down that road, go down the riverboat type of branding. I don't know. I don't know if that works anymore. You have Austin FC. You have the Sacramento Republic, which Allison Cupertino has put on the list, but I don't know if Allison put it on as best or worst side of it. I think worst. I kind of like it. I actually do. I wouldn't put it in my best, but I'm okay with it. And maybe it's just because I've heard it so much, and it's become comfortable for me because it sounds right, because I've heard it for years. That's another big part of it. For all the FC Dallas is boring and Toronto FC is boring, you hear it long enough and it's okay. Now, Toronto has kind of created a nickname around it, the Reds, and that's become very common to describe Toronto's team. Dallas doesn't really have that. For a while, that people called them the Hoops when they played in the red and white hoop jerseys, which were some of the best in the league's history, and I hate that they went away from it because you also lost that nickname, the Hoops. Are they going to come up with something like that? In Atlanta, you've got the 5 stripes, and I know people get bent out of shape about it because there were more than 5 stripes on the kit this year. There's 5 stripes in the logo, so it does still kind of work. But I do think it dipped a little bit in how much it was used in 2019. I'll be curious to see if something else replaces it at any point, because it's not an official nickname. What happens in Charlotte? What does the official, if there is one, nickname be? Is there an unofficial one? Is there an accepted one? What does that do with Charlottetown FC? We're going to get Jessica Charman on the line. I want to see what she thinks of Charlottetown FC and what she thinks of American soccer team names in general. Could be an interesting conversation. We'll see what Jess thinks right after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here, December 13th edition. Friday flashback question. Best and worst team names in American soccer history. We've got to get a different perspective on the show on these team names. Jessica Charman joining us now. What's up, Jess?
Just got my driver's license sorted, so it's a good day here for Jessica Charman today, Jason.
We're all in trouble, is what you're telling us.
Exactly. British drivers on the opposite side of the road, it is a little bit confusing sometimes.
All right, I think I don't need to get on the road today. I think I'll be okay. All right, we got to get into these team names out of Charlotte because Charlotte's going to be in the league. Looks like it's going to be announced next week. According to Ian Thomas at Front Office Sport, Charlottetown FC is the leader in the clubhouse. It's not a confirmed, locked-in name, but it sounds like the one that people are going to go with. Now, we talked about it when this list came out, and John and I went through some different teams that have town as their moniker. We've got our cities in this league. We've got our cities in England as well, but there are towns in England. How much does it actually matter the size of the place that is the town or city? Does that actually matter in the naming conventions in England?
I think in England it does, because people take a lot of pride from coming from a town versus a city, just based on the size and the nature of it. There's all these weird rules that differentiate between a town and a city in England. I think one of them, just off the top of my head, is that it has to have a cathedral to be considered a city, which is quite ironic, because now England isn't even the most religious of countries, but I think it roots back to history whereby, so Winchester is considered a city, which isn't even that big, but Reading will always be a town because it doesn't have a cathedral. So it's an interesting one that's rooted in history. A lot of it is colloquial to an extent, and people interpret it based on population size, and they are used somewhat interchangeably. But when you get down to it, when it comes to a soccer team, I think it has that much more meaning, because if you're rooting for your town, it seems like you're that much more grassroots, that much more local than if you're rooting for the city team.
So how does it feel to you if in 2021 Atlanta United opens the season with Charlottetown, and Chris Ashley, our friend in Greenville, is saying that the word on the street is that the Townies would be the nickname, which I love. I love it. You do?
I don't know. I like the town, just the town. But that's, again, maybe coming back from English roots where a lot of teams, support the town. But for me, I guess I asked you as soon as you mentioned it, whether Charlotte does constitute a town or a city, which again shows, I guess, the imperative nature that we have in England to connect it literally to the geography. But if that's not such a big deal here, I think it's pretty cool. I think it's emphasizing the homegrown nature of Charlotte, the fact that it's a small, tight-knit community potentially. And I would like to see if that then resonates with the soccer community, because if you have a team like Town, it's almost like the word united in my mindset, that it should suggest that it's a tight-knit, bonded community of soccer fans that are all most likely coming from the local area. So it does enhance that locality and the sort of importance of supporting your nearby team.
Yeah, Town just has a different feel. I don't think there is a specific designation between the two in the United States. There's definitely nothing that I know of about if you don't have a cathedral, you can't be a city.
There wouldn't be many cities.
No, it's true. So I don't know if it really falls into that, but I do love that calling it Charlottetown in a lot of ways makes it feel personal. It makes it feel more community-based.
It's different at last. We talk about wanting unique team names, and as much as maybe it is inspired from other leagues, that's fine. But it's nice to not just have another United or, another SC. I am intrigued about the FC after it. I guess that's, again, the football club to sort of keep that rooted in the soccer culture from across the pond kind of thing with the town.
Yeah, it's one that, I like that.
How do you feel about it?
I could take it or leave it. If it's part of the official team name, fine. I don't think they get referred to as that. A Toronto FC and an FC Dallas are different because that's all that there is in the name. But I can't ever think of calling it verbally Atlanta United FC.
It's so long. I think that the only people that do that is maybe in journalism, they have to write the full name, but it's not something that you refer to as colloquially, which is why I don't have an issue with it either. And for me, soccer club would sound horrible, but that's just still not completely assimilating to American culture yet.
Oh, see, now I would, if I'm picking between the two, I would go SC over FC.
Yeah, which I think that in America it should be. It's just my personal taste.
I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen more SCs as opposed to FCs in the United States. But anyway, it's interesting how we're kind of building our own culture. What was your take on just team names in general as you've gotten to know American soccer culture? Because now we've got all these different influences in it. You have an Inter Miami, you have your Toronto FCs and your more traditional ones, but we've had things like the Kansas City Wizards, and we do have a Portland Timbers and Seattle Sounders and Vancouver Whitecaps. What works for you? What sounds good to you in terms of team names?
It took some getting used to, because obviously when I was growing up, it was basically FC, United, maybe Rovers. Rovers was a little bit quirky, but that was about it when it came to things like that in terms of naming. So it took some getting used to. Is there a story
behind all the Rovers names?
I have no idea.
There's a bunch of them.
I would like to look it up because I think there's some good stories behind it. When I think to England, some of the most unique names I can think of, you've got Wolves, which is still Wolverhampton Wanderers, that gets shortened down to Wolves. Right. A lot of people misinterpret and think it's Wolverhampton Wolves, but it's not. The Wolves comes just from Wolverhampton.
Yeah.
Here it's a lot different. I like it to an extent, I guess, from the outside view in, because it seems very American. I grew up in a time when LA Galaxy was the one that we'd heard of in England. And it made sense to me because LA was where we knew all the stars were. So it was kind of a clever twist on it.
Okay.
But having moved here and played college soccer, I have learned more animals than I could have ever thought possible. I've had to Google what they were. I played against some bear cats, some stormy petrels, some I don't even know what. Hey, petrel's petrol. It's tomato, right? But
I love the story behind it. We got to share it because it threw me at first when I started calling the games last year, and I'm like, all right, first I'm like, stormy petrels. What's a petrel? All right, I know it's a bird, but I need a little more information. Okay, got it. And then you start hearing it, and I looked it up. I went through all the pronunciation. I'm like, okay, it's the stormy petrels. Got it. And then you start to hear it, and it's the petrels. That's the way that at Oglethorpe they are referred to. And it's because of the mascot, Petey. Petey the
Because
petrel.
apparently Petty the petrel doesn't sound quite as nice off the tongue, does it, Jason?
No. Petey the petty petrel would be an interesting one. But you get names that have these connections to the local communities so much in the U.S., and I think the nickname is that extension of it. It's I do like the ones that have a nickname, whether it's a college team, whether it's a minor league team, whether it's a soccer team, that you hear that nickname and you're like, okay, I get where they're from. It's the random ones like Tampa Bay Mutiny, for example, or Dallas Burn. Like
Yeah.
Dallas Burn, that could be anywhere. It has nothing to do with Dallas.
And then there's
has nothing to do.
the what's the Utah? It's not soccer, but there's the Utah team that moved, the Jazz, right?
The
That
Jazz.
moved from, I know it's not soccer, but they moved from New Orleans to Utah, but they kept the same name. But Jazz makes sense in New Orleans. In Utah, I don't know if there's many jazz musicians that come from Utah, Jason.
I don't think there's very many. The Los Angeles Lakers are another one. They moved from Minneapolis, the land of 10,000 lakes. And I don't think there's a ton of lakes in Los Angeles. I know there are some lakes, but Lakers in Minneapolis made sense. In Los Angeles, maybe not.
And that's where there's the flaw in that connecting team names to the area. If you up and leave or you get bought out, I mean, look at Wimbledon and MK Dons in Europe. They had to go completely to a different name because they knew that by buying out a team, they weren't going to keep anyone happy by keeping it the same name.
Yeah, and that one is a very complicated situation, and you couldn't pull that off. I mean, even things that we see with teams that, you know, go out of business and have to be restructured and have to actually start as a different business name or a different proper club name, but, you know, colloquially, again, they become what they always had been. I think Napoli went through this, for example, in Italy, where the actual name of the club is different because they were in Serie C and they went out of business and they restructured and came back. Didn't Rangers go through this as well in Scotland, where it's technically, and our Aberdeen friends get very riled up about this, it's technically a new club now as opposed to the old club, but they've embraced the old history because, of course, you're going to.
And all your fans are still going to support you despite going through the change. But I believe they went through administration to such a serious extent that you're right, that they had to rebuild from scratch. I was going to point out about funny soccer names. I guess it's a story that people might enjoy. As a kid, I hated the fact that I was a Reading fan to an extent. And not because of anything on the soccer field, but merely because of the spelling of the team name. So my dad would purchase me merchandise all the time that would be like cute little hats saying, "I love Reading" on them. But I would go to school wearing a hat that said, "I love Reading," and no one would have the context that Reading was a football team. So I was the little dork that loved reading constantly. So for me, that was always a tough one. And when you come to team names in England, you've got all the pronunciations. That some of my favorite things to listen to is the new teams up and coming and hearing people try and pronounce them. I think Leicester City was my favorite when Leicester was up and coming. But now it's a credit to the American fan base because there's Premier League fans here that know more about the Premier League than I do, even though I grew up watching it for the first 18 years of my life, you know? So I think it's an amazing thing how we do embrace different soccer cultures across the world.
Yeah, it's accessibility. I mean, you know, growing up for me, we had first just a highlight show that the Fox regional networks, like Fox Sports South, would air, and it was just I think hour. I don't think it was more than an hour. Highlights of the weekend, and you'd get one featured match and maybe get 10-minute segment on it, and the rest was just the highlights, and that was all you got. Then you started to get matches in full, and now what NBC Sports does with everything wrapping around it, and it's not just England anymore, you know, it's easy to follow Germany or Spain or Italy, and these things just become part of the culture, and then it brings us back to our American soccer culture, which is a gumbo, a stew of all of it, you know, including the Latin influences as well, and that's something I would like to see creep into the team names more.
Mm-hmm.
More
I
Latin
agree.
Influence. I love Inter Miami and what they've done with their official name. Like, cool, it's different. It's different, but it's not. It fits. It works.
And it represents the culture down there in Miami, where there are so many bilingual people and people of different cultures. And I think it is a fan base that is sometimes overlooked. The Latin American population, when it comes to soccer, without stereotyping, is one of the most well-versed in soccer just because it's sort of in their blood a lot of the time. A lot of my friends from playing in different Latin American leagues have their children who are 2-3 years old coming to watch soccer games on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night constantly, and they grow up with the game. And I think a lot of the time it's overlooked. We see it in Spanish language accounts without getting into it, but not all teams are choosing to adapt and correctly employ people that are bilingual in Spanish. I would have no right in trying to create any Spanish language content with my Spanglish attempts, but we need proper quality Spanish language content, and that should be included in the culture of the soccer teams, particularly when teams are popping up in areas where 50-60% of the fans are going to have that Latino heritage.
You opened up my hot take of the morning. Somebody pointed this out about Miami, in that somebody said, like, oh, they tweet more in Spanish than they do in English from their main account. I don't think they have a separate Spanish language account. Good.
Yeah, why should they?
I'm cool with that. I like that better than what U.S. Soccer did, for example, where they created a Spanish language account and didn't properly maintain it to the point that Twitter shut it down because
that's embarrassing. At that point,
embarrassing.
That's horrible. And I agree with you, Jason. You've got to think, when you study social media or when you know about social media, at the end of the day, you care most about the people that are following, interacting, and responding to you. So clearly, Inter Miami's realized that maybe a large group of our followers would appreciate more tweets in Spanish, and they're catering to that. And that shouldn't be a problem. I bet we're seeing plenty of interactions, and the fan base is appreciating it. And when you go to Miami, you'll hear Spanish on every corner, so it shouldn't be an issue. And I agree with you. It's one of those where when you do separate the two, you wonder whether that then is almost excluding to an extent. You're separating to act more inclusively, but on the flip side, you're also saying that, okay, we don't want to cater you through the mainstream. We're going to create a side dish instead of making you part of the main.
100%. And that's why I would like to see MLS teams on the whole tweet in Spanish. And if it,
but
and,
accurately.
Accurate, of course, and really be authentic about it. Yeah, and it's something I think that it's easy to point something out and yell and laugh and make fun of it, but the fact that the effort has been made, I will take that first. Now you've got to improve on it. You can't consistently be making mistakes either way. If you're a Spanish language account and you're tweeting in English and you're making a bunch of mistakes, all right, over time, you need to get better with it. Same for a team account tweeting in a different language. It's got to be correct. Mistakes happen, but they can't be a regular occurrence.
Yeah, it's about consistency.
Yeah. Montreal, for example, tweets and communicates in English and French all the time. Everything is bilingual because that suits Montreal. Miami, it makes sense the way they're doing it. I think Atlanta, we've seen Atlanta United tweet more in Spanish, and I'm good with it. I agree. The fan base enjoys it.
And it reflects the players as well. And we sometimes forget that. Obviously, social media is geared most towards the fan base and the followers, but the players want to interact. The players want to be involved. And when you have so many key players of Spanish-speaking heritage and Latin descent, why not show that you're embracing them when you talk about them sometimes too? I think it's very special.
Yeah, I love the Spanish language content that does have a translation. Of course, it's helpful. I mean, I would never say I'm anything near fluent. I understand enough to be dangerous, but it's great to have that because then it feels more open for everyone to be part of. It was something that I was concerned about coming into year one, was how would Atlanta embrace, star players who either don't speak English or speak very little English because they're not comfortable doing it publicly. And Atlanta, really surprised me in the fact that the city didn't care about that. And I think that's something that I hope other teams look at as well, in that, you can put out Spanish language content to a community that maybe you don't have as many, Spanish speaking fans as other clubs do, but your fan base will embrace it because they love these players and they get to know these players and they want to know more about them.
And I think that's what's key. You mentioned that they get to know the players. I feel like when you watch those videos of the players speaking in Spanish and fluently communicating with each other, you get such a better feel. Even if there wasn't translation under it, you would see the body language, you would see the natural communication, you would see the way that they banter with each other through their body language and laughing more, and they just come across as so real compared to when you put them in an uncomfortable situation when they're worried about saying the wrong thing and they're worried about how the media may twist some English that they're not fully comfortable with. So I love watching some of them do the when they did the FIFA rating cards. Those are some of my favorite videos because I feel like you actually get to know these players, their personality types, and the balance of their relationships.
Yeah, those are some of my favorites. Franco Escobar getting very upset about his FIFA rating. It's one of the funniest things I saw last season. We're going to talk more about Atlanta United and the squad as it's coming together while we have Jess on the line. We're going to take a quick break. If you have questions, tweet them at us at Soccer Down Here. We'll get to all of that right after this.
The Ranger Station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service Ad Council and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinsky of Apolinsky and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back. Final segment, hour number 1, SDH on Friday the 13th. Friday flashback topic. Let us know your best and worst American soccer team names. We'll see if any come through. We'll get into that before we finish up with Jessica Charman, who's hanging out with us this morning. John is off talking high school football. He's got, we got hung up on having, double headers at times, Jess. John's not doing play-by-play or color. He's doing the hosting of, I think, 5 games today and 5 tomorrow, or 5 and 4.
I don't want to hear him speak on Monday. No. His voice is going to be done. What did I do? In the Peach Belt Conference, I think I did 3 on a Friday and 2 on a Sunday. And I literally had to cancel everything for the next week.
We did for high school this past year. They split it up. The first year I did high school, first 2 years I did high school finals, it was 4 and 4. And when they split I think it's Class A that they split to private and public.
Yeah, it is.
We got 2 on Thursday, 2 on Friday, and 4 on Saturday. We didn't get the extra classification, so that's a little more manageable. Like 2 days in a row of all day of talking, it kind of wipes you out.
Absolutely. So we'll be nice to him on Monday if he's ready to come back.
Yes, we will. Let's get into Atlanta United. We haven't had a chance to catch up about the 2 announcements that they've had in terms of players and in terms of the roster here lately. Let's start with Brooks Lennon, a USU 23 who has come over from Real Salt Lake. You got him for $300,000 in allocation money. What's your thought about Lennon joining Atlanta?
Firstly, I love his attitude. I love how he has been very open about wanting to come to Atlanta United, how he has seen the coaching staff, he's seen the way the team plays this year. And so he is making that decision to come over here based on the current coach, which I think is something that we've seen a lot of concerns about in the past when there were players that wanted to come based on Tata's style. It was a hard adjustment. Lennon has been very open about enjoying the way that Atlanta United plays, that he has been looking for a new home and he asked for that transfer. So it's always good to have players on your team that want to be coming and playing for the Five Stripes. He is young, which is both a blessing and a curse in some ways, but he does have experience in this league, which I think negates some of the youth side of things. But at the same time, he's still fairly inexperienced. It's going to take some work, but I think it's an exciting signing, and it's good to have someone that has U.S. national experience. But as we saw with Mars Robinson at the end, maybe it's not always a blessing to have players that represent the country at times.
Yeah, that one added on to the Joseph Martinez quad injury in 2017, and people get terrified anytime that a player's called up. I hate that because the representing your national team and taking the Atlanta United name out into the world and spreading it's really big. It's a really important element, but we've had some bad luck with this.
No, I agree. And I think it's a hard one now where it used to be that playing for your country in general was the most honor, like the biggest honor in the world. But now you're getting players that's clubs are putting pressure on them to turn down being called up, or themselves are opting to that their club is more important than their country. And it's something that we see in England a lot, that club comes before country. Jamie Vardy didn't have any interest in playing for England past 2017, and now look at how he's playing. It's a shame, but it's the way it is these days. Your club is the one that pays you the most money, so oftentimes they do want to prioritize that. And when you pick up injuries like with Mars Robinson, like with Joseph Martinez, you can see sometimes why the club may have a few little whispers in the ear with a player that may not be going there to play and start, that it might be better just to stay home.
Lennon has talked about his ambition of playing for the U.S. men's national team, and another player who I think is in the same situation as Emerson Hyndman. Atlanta United got the deal done on a permanent basis. His contract with Bournemouth, I think by most reports, was up in the summer. He didn't have a future there, so it makes sense for Bournemouth to do the permanent transfer. Probably a very reasonable price tag, and now Emerson Hyndman, after a 6-month loan stint, is going to be in Atlanta on a permanent basis. What do you think about Hyndman? It seems to be mixed reactions to Emerson.
Yeah, I know you and I have had we don't always see eye to eye on the topic. I know you were very happy with him. I thought he was a little bit inconsistent at times. Maybe I was a bit hard on him, but he's got big boots to fill, and I think that's what concerns me the most. He did well in his loan spell. I thought there were moments where he showed how much talent he does have on the ball, but I thought that he was inconsistent, and particularly there are a few moments in front of goal to me where I can remember several tweets I put about him not finishing, and then he scored later on in that game after missing a couple of sitters. He scored the most difficult goal. So I think he's definitely got a huge amount of potential. We have to remember he's still only 23. He's a youngster. If he was signed over in England like he was with Bournemouth, they obviously saw something in him. We see something in him. I trust that. But I am obviously nervous with Nagbe going. It's a huge boots to fill for Hyndman, and he is a youngster, so we'll have to see how that goes for him. But he definitely has the technical skills. We've seen that. He definitely has good discipline. If he's coached well, I think he'll be able to sit and go however it's opted that he'll do. But he just has to find that consistency, and the best way to find consistency for a player is getting minutes under your belt, consistent minutes week in, week out, which with Nagbe gone, you can expect him to be playing even more soccer.
Yeah, that's going to be, I think, what I'll be watching for in the transfer window now is Atlanta United going to go out and add another central midfielder, or are they going to roll with what they have? And I think we'll get a very good sense of how they feel about Hyndman, Remedi, Lorenowitz and what they can contribute in 2020 based on how Atlanta United handles the transfer market. Mo Adams as well. I think it's easy to forget about Mo Adams.
I
we didn't see him a bunch, but he's very different than the rest. I agree.
And I loved watching him with the twos. I think for people that watched him with the twos, they saw the ability he had. He became, sadly, for the first team, he was more of a substitute to waste time in the end. We saw him coming in with 3 minutes to play, with 5 minutes to play.
To close things out.
So we didn't really get a look at him, but he did score against LAFC, right? It was, I think.
Yep.
And he's definitely shown that dynamic, and he is different. But you're right, Jason. There's 4 centre midfielders in that pack, and it's all about whether they're going to look to slot Jeff in a more defensive role, if he's going to fall into the back line, and then that leaves an extra space gaping. And I love Remedy. I think he had a great first season. He obviously fell out of favours towards the end of the season most recently, but I think he'll have a point to prove, and no player likes to go. I think the hardest way to go is from playing week in, week out, from being a really key role player to being dropped and barely seeing game time. That's the kind of thing that either makes or breaks you. And for me as a Remedy fan, I'm really hoping it's the thing that's really changed his off season, that he's working on potentially getting in a bit better shape. I think that he struggled with a few, concussion and all of that jazz, but I never thought he looked completely agile on the pitch from my perspective as a centre midfielder. And maybe he's working on a few things like that with his explosiveness that will push him ahead potentially of the pack in terms of getting game time.
I think Remedy and Adams are 2 players who have a lot of opportunity here in front of them to push for playing time. I mean, the fact that Adams was getting that time with the twos, and even if it was late, kind of being the guy to come in and shut down everything late in a match defensively. He's the maybe most pure number 6 from a defensive standpoint that Atlanta United has on the roster. And if he locks the spot down, well, then you don't have to go out in the market, because I feel like that's the position that if you get big performances out of the defensive midfield, that can elevate Atlanta United to an even higher quality.
I agree. We need that security in front of the back line, and we need to have a bit more discipline with that number 6. And you're right. I think Atlanta United, you don't want to go out and buy new players all the time. I think sometimes we get caught up in big name transfer signings, but if you can keep players that have been around your culture, that have been around your coaching staff, that have been around each other, it's so much better. You see a lot of teams in the lower divisions in England struggle because they get all these big name loan signings from Premier League teams, but they only play for one season, then they're gone. They're great for a season, but you don't build that culture, you don't build that consistency, you don't get that rapport with the players and the managers. And that's what happens with Atlanta United. If we keep going out buying, changing players constantly, you don't build up that community of players that know how each other plays. So hopefully they can use players like Remedy, they can use players like Adams, and trust in those players that have bought into the culture already for the past year.
Okay, we've had a couple of questions throughout the week that have come up and we've dug deeper into. And with all of our talk about referees and laws of the game, I had to save this one for you. Tom Russo at Airborne DJ asked about our conversation going through the changes to the laws of the game and how MLS will look different now to look like the Premier League and the rest of the leagues that have incorporated these. So Tom asked, 1, would you be in favor of adding a second central referee a la the National Hockey League, and high schools have second referees? And 2, are there any out-of-the-box new rules or rule changes that you would consider to the game in general? So you get to sit on the IFAB panel, and first off, somebody comes up and says, how about a second referee with a whistle on the field? So
you'd have your 2 linesmen and then 2 center refs, and would they take one half each, or would they be like left or right?
They do like a diagonal, at least the way they do it in high school. I honestly don't remember playing in a high school game when I played, and this was forever ago, that had the dual referee system. No. I know that some states do it, it's not as common as it used to be, and it's more of like a diagonal run that they do. I think they try to get opposite of the AR in that side of the field, so you're kind of covering the whole field with your ARs and your referees in quadrants.
Oof, I don't know. I think that adds too many whistles into the. We already complain about one whistle, let alone two. But having gone back into refereeing lately, I'll tell you, it's the hardest job on the pitch. And we do look. Does the standard of pro need to get upped? Yes. But is it a lot harder for pro referees? I saw a really interesting interview with Howard Webb where he was talking about the disadvantage of the U.S. system. There aren't as many highly competitive leagues for players to get, for referees to get experience before they're exposed to MLS. They can referee some USL games, but before USL, what is there? ADASL, local amateur leagues. There's not that exposure to high-level games to get practice before you're thrown in at the deep end. In England, Howard Webb was explaining, it took him 9 years or something like that. Don't quote me on that, but it was lots and lots of time of refereeing conference games and then getting gradually pushed up to League Two, League One, Championship before he ever touched a Premier League game. So I think that's what we forget sometimes, that a lot of these referees that end up in MLS maybe don't have the same level of experience. And they've got to start somewhere. And unfortunately, they're starting at a higher level to get those reps. So it's a tough one. I wouldn't add another referee, though. I think that it's hard enough with one referee on the pitch, let alone two.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it would add too much complication in game management because two different people are going to see fouls differently, and is it a yellow or is it not a yellow, or does it just need a conversation? Like, all of that's going to be different
plus
depending on
VAR.
the referee you're near. Yeah, when you add that into it, it's very complicated. What would be an outside-the-box, completely different way of thinking that you would like to see them consider, at least try out somewhere?
Okay, this isn't a real one, but I love in indoor where there's like a red line that's further away, so that if you score from like 30 yards out, if you scored a 30-yard worldie, it would be 2 goals.
People would lose their minds.
Can you imagine how cool it would be, though, to see everyone attempt? You would have people attempting worldie goals constantly. There was just like a second line from like 25 yards out that if you scored off one touch, has to be like a service and then a one-time finish, and you get 2 goals.
This is like rock and jock soccer. I like it.
What about you? What would you like? A more realistic one?
A more realistic one for me would be, and this was something that I thought they should do before VAR even came into it. The fourth official can do more, I think, than just be there for like game management in terms of paperwork and substitutions and
they
being
have
yelled
the
at by
easiest job. Honestly, they do have it pretty easy.
Like, give them a monitor. Give them a monitor and give them their table and have them right there to where, okay, it doesn't have to go to VAR all the time. They're sitting there and they're like, hey, this happened. Hey, you need to take a look at this. Or, hey, this is going to go to VAR. Get ready. You could speed up the process if you just give the fourth official a monitor and their table, and then maybe they don't get yelled at as much by the coaches.
And then a serious one, though, we've talked about it before. I do think we need like a blood substitution, like a rugby-style substitution. Yeah. That one like goes without saying, and that's one that I think is realistic. A concussion. If a player has a head injury, they can be subbed out for a real observation, and then if they're good to go, they go back in. They don't get penalized for the sub, and if they're not, then the sub can count, or even if the sub doesn't count. But I think we need to have more encouragement over serious injuries because it's bad. And I tweeted about it on the weekend in Premier League. It wasn't a head injury, but in the Villa game with Mears, he clearly pulled his hamstring, but who made the decision on whether he kept playing? Well, it was Mears. You saw when they zoomed in, the one saying, no, I'm good to go. And look, physiotherapists, you're meant to be there as a impartial part. I get it. You're connected with the team and, you know, the coach might be mad at you, but you're there to protect the players. And players, even as professionals, don't have that mindset of, I'm going to look after my body when they're in the middle of the game. All they're thinking about is, you know, winning a match. And he ended up costing Villa, as far as I'm concerned, with the goal.
Yeah, I completely agree. More takes like that on soccer over there, Crumpets and Espresso. If you haven't checked out our weekend soccer preview, it comes out on Fridays, and it is kind of all over the place in terms of what to look for in England, and now Jarrett's throwing in Scottish updates for us, and I try to hit some of the South American and Mexican stuff, and Nick with his Italian takes. So, Jess, you going to have some crumpets for us today?
I should do, yeah. I will get off and do some recording.
All right. Jess is going to go do her research for the Crumpets and Espresso segment, but thanks for the time this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to take a quick break, be back on the other side with some of the Friday flashback input from you guys. Be right back.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky and Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
You're listening to Soccer Down Here daily on SDH Networks, a division of OSG Sports. Find us at Soccer Down Here on Facebook and Twitter. The time is now the top of the hour. Peep, y'all.
Welcome back. Soccer Down Here, hour number 2. Thanks again to at Jess Talks Footy with an IE, Jessica Charman, for hanging out on hour number 1 with us on a Friday. I don't know if the 2-point goal idea is going to stick. Tavka with a good point, saying that Pitti shoots from distance enough. Miguel Almiron would have been trying to find those spots on the field a lot in 2018 as well to look for the 2-point goal. It's fun, though, in a training scenario, and I've used it before in training teams and in coaching standpoints, and it's fun in like a fun game. You know, if it's just a pickup game or whatever, it's a fun element to add. I mean, I've said many times that I wish MLS, as part of their All-Star week, would look at the Rock and Jock idea that they used to do. I think Rock and Jock basketball was amazing, and they had basically this idea. They had the spots on the court where, you know, it's 5 points, or I think they had the 10-point one, and then they would lower the, I want to say it was a 25-foot basket, and that was 25 points. So in a game like that is silly, and it's celebrities, and it's supposed to be silly, I'm all for having arcs and multiple point goals and all the ridiculousness that you can add. A Rock and Jock celebrity/legends MLS game, you can do it on a smaller field for All-Star Week, would be amazing. And please make it happen, Major League Soccer. Please, please, please. It would be a lot of fun. All right, there's a ton of different things to get to. So hour number 2, since you're with me solo, it is going to be all over the place. I either apologize or just warn you in advance. So Daniel Hutchins, who listens from Oklahoma, gave a little more information on, we talked about it with Oklahoma City adding or getting their vote to pass on building a new stadium. And Daniel said, it was one of 16 projects on the list that got passed. And most of the other projects are a lot less work to get started. So, yes, it's passed. Yes, there's funding for it. It still might take a while. And the stadium that the OKC Energy play in right now is Taft Stadium. It's a middle school stadium for football. When the Energy have their own stadium, it will go back to just being a school stadium. And the idea, and Oklahoma City's been a little quiet about it lately, but the idea was this is basically the platform for them to join MLS someday. And Oklahoma City has, the NBA. Could they support Major League Soccer? I think they could. I do think it's a definite possibility. And having your own venue that you start from, now it's not going to be MLS sized straight away, and I'm assuming that it would have the ability to be expanded. It's a very important step. So love it. Love that Oklahoma City is advancing in this. OKC Energy's done a lot of cool stuff on the youth side as well, not even just from a grassroots standpoint with building mini pitches, that they've done that too, but their academy. It's a strong academy, and USL clubs that are launching academies and developing professional players, very important element to it. We get hung up on the MLS academies a lot, but adding the USL academies into the mix and developing players, very, very, very important to see. Okay, let's get into some of the Friday flashback feedback. And thanks again, Daniel, for listening. Now, I want to hear Daniel's feedback. Maybe he'll shoot me a message about Tulsa and the Roughnecks, if that's on the best or worst names and where FC Tulsa stands. So, Shiva chimes in and says, I don't know much about the history of American soccer, but my favorite right now is Atlanta United because of what it represents and how it has truly united the city. That's an underrated element of this, and I know that was the goal that Atlanta United had at the beginning. They did want United to mean more than just a traditional soccer name, and I think they've accomplished that. It's very cool. There was a lot of criticism when it was announced because it wasn't like uniting two teams. When you hear united names around the world, generally it's because two clubs or three clubs have come together to form a club. That's why they call it United. So Atlanta didn't do that, but I think they've embraced the meaning behind the name and really, truly made it powerful. Shiva's least favorite right now is the Houston Dynamo. And she said, just because it sounds outdated to me and I don't understand the Dynamo part. If you remember back when Houston came into the league, and this is going to go into the Wayback Machine for a minute here, the Houston Dynamo are actually the original San Jose Clash, which became the San Jose Earthquakes, which moved to Houston, and they started play in 2006. It was announced in December of 2005. So this was a complicated situation. San Jose could not get a stadium built. They were at Spartan Stadium on a college campus. It was you think Yankee Stadium's a narrow field. Spartan Stadium was far more narrow. I think the only one that was more narrow ever in MLS was Ohio Stadium when the Columbus Crew played there at the very beginning. I want to say that was like 60 yards. Spartan was maybe 62 or 63. So San Jose could not get a stadium built. They made the decision to let the owners, Anschutz Entertainment Group, AEG, move the team to Houston. They kept the Earthquakes name and history in San Jose because they wanted to get back there, period. So, December 15th, 2005, they announced the relocation of the San Jose franchise, players and coaches under contract to Houston. Kept the history in San Jose, so they had to come up with something new. All right, so what were they going to go with? Now, if you remember, initially what was announced was Houston 1836. I hope I have that right. Now, they did that because they thought that what they would get out of it was, okay, it's a historical nod to when the city of Houston was founded. And, man, was it as late as February that they were still going to be Houston 1836? Or no, it was February when they changed it. So 1836 was the idea. There was a whole lot of pushback because the Mexican-American community, which was going to be a large part of your fan base and which has not been enough of your fan base, were not happy about this name because it referred to, when Texas broke away from Mexico. It was divisive. It just didn't make sense. It was very tone deaf in terms of wanting to name it that. So then they switched it to Dynamo. I'm assuming that it was somewhat of a last-minute situation. I'm assuming that it was something they kind of had to do quickly and go with something. It's honestly kind of basic. Now Houston is known as the Space City. So does that play into Dynamo in the name? Sure. It's okay. I'm used to it, so I don't, it doesn't really bother me. But it's kind of basic. I wonder if Houston would ever rebrand. Again, it'd be the second one. I wonder if they would ever rebrand because that name doesn't really resonate. Interesting take from Shiva looking at this as a new fan on the team names and that type of stuff. So let's keep going. Tafka on team names. I'm on board for traditional naming with a tad of flair, but not normal American-style sports names. See, that's a tough balance to hit. It says it sounds so hokey for a soccer team with normal American-style sports names. Makes a team sound like a U10 youth league to me. See, now, here's another thing. When you go to the youth names, and this was something that we did with our in-house league at Soccer in the Streets, I think they still do, use the MLS team names. The problem is when so many are like city-specific, well, then you're going to be FC Dallas, but that's okay. Because it gets the kids to know the league. And that's a very important thing. It's something that, we've talked about here. For Atlanta United fans, it's very important to understand Major League Soccer and the league and where Atlanta United fits into it and what's going on across the league in terms of storylines, because then you're more connected. That's why when you look at national TV ratings, they're not as good as they could be. Because I think a lot of fans in their cities watch their team, and that's it. They don't watch other games. They don't watch the big Portland-Seattle game because it doesn't have meaning to them. That's why the NFL is as big as it is. It has meaning across the board. You're interested in all the storylines if you're a football fan because that's how it's covered. I think it's important to have it, and I remember as a kid playing both baseball and basketball in the 80s. In the youth leagues, one was just the county associate or city association, town association, I guess would be more appropriate today. And the other was a YMCA. The team names were the Braves and the Cubs and the Tigers, and the team names were the Lakers and the Hawks and the Celtics, and that was just what it was. So having the youth names follow MLS naming conventions is actually pretty cool in getting to understand the league and the heritage and the names and who's who and all that. Tafka goes on to say, Sounders, Crew, Impact, Union, Timbers, Republic are all perfectly balanced. You cross the line when you start giving names of animals and such that are supposed to have a level of intrinsic intimidation. Traditional is professional, and I think Tafka leaned to Charlotte Town and Charlotte Athletic as his two favorites for Charlotte. You can do the animal thing in certain circumstances. If you're just trying to sound intimidating, yeah, it sounds hokey. I agree. But if it is actually a tie-in to the city or the state or the region, I can get on board with it. You can sell me on that. I'm not automatically against it. So we don't have any animal names in MLS. We have animal nicknames that are unofficial, like the Loons. That's cool. DC United has the eagle in their logo, but they're not called the Eagles or anything with that. Dallas has the steer in their logo. That doesn't play into anything with how they're referred to. I mean, I kind of guess Red Bulls if we want to get kind of specific, but more about the drink than the actual Bulls. But okay. Nobody's just calling them the Bulls or Toros or anything like that. You have the Lions of Orlando, which it's kind of cool when I see in Spanish when people are talking about some of the potential signings Orlando City could make in this offseason. Leones de Orlando City. I like that. I'm okay with that. But it's not official. RSL uses a lion too, so maybe they can fight over it. That's it. Cincinnati has a lion too. They can have a lion derby between Cincinnati and Orlando and RSL and let them all fight it out. Yeah, no real animals in MLS. Interesting. Okay, I never really thought about that. Okay, let's move on. The Charlotte stuff is really starting to get a lot of traction. Sean Flynn reminds us all that Sean Flynn was on Charlotte Talks and has said years ago that Charlotte would land an MLS team. I didn't think it would happen. I didn't think it would happen because of the original bid. It wasn't a strong bid. And I think this might be a deep dive that we do in SDH land, because back in the old Blog Talk Radio archives, we did an interview with a spokesperson from the original bid group. And their whole idea was to get Memorial Stadium and refurbish it. And if they didn't get that, then they weren't really interested in doing anything else. It was all or nothing, and they didn't get it. It wasn't really managed well. The whole situation wasn't handled well. They didn't really make a compelling case. I don't think they handled the politics of it well. And it looked like Charlotte was going to fizzle out. It was when David Tepper bought the Panthers and took advantage of the situation that Jerry Richardson had to sell it. Tepper steps in, grabs it, and immediately said that soccer was going to be part of it. I was on board from that point. Once you got just a little into David Tepper and saw some of the moves he was making and saw where his vision was, I was fully on board then. But I could not say that years ago Charlotte would get an MLS team. I didn't think it was going to happen. I thought Raleigh would get it ahead of them. And this is something that a lot of folks are talking about in the Carolinas right now. I've seen it said that Raleigh and the Triangle has a soccer culture, and Charlotte is trying to create one. Don't know if I really say that's fair. Don't know if that guarantees success or not either. As we've seen, some markets that have a soccer culture have struggled in the league. Chicago's one. Chicago's got a rich, long soccer culture. Well, the Chicago Fire have really struggled because they haven't capitalized on it. And in some ways, they haven't really built on it and maybe insulted some of the people in the soccer culture. All right, that's a problem. It doesn't guarantee success. A lot of people said that Atlanta could not be successful because they didn't have a soccer culture. Well, they did. It just wasn't as known in the professional soccer world. And people would look at attendance, and we talked about it earlier this week with Charlotte Independence. You can't make a direct comparison between lower division attendance and MLS attendance. Not if the team is presented in the right way. And Charlotte so far is being presented in the right way of being big and being a big deal for the city. Atlanta United was presented in that way. It didn't feel like the Atlanta Silverbacks, and I don't think Charlotte will feel like the Charlotte Independents. It's going to feel completely new and different and big. So I don't think you can draw the same comparison. It's apples to kumquats, two completely different things. So the Charlotte, Raleigh, North Carolina, team of the Carolinas, all this different stuff. I'm fascinated to see how this plays out. Charlottetown, I am on board with. If that's where they go, and the Townies as the nickname, I love that. But I also, spent a lot of time in Athens, Georgia, and you had the students in the townies. So townies is just a phrase that I've heard many, many times. I don't know exactly how common it is. I think it could work. It could be kind of cool. I want to see how people really grab onto that and rally around it. Ricky Ricardo brings another one back. So we did worst logos last week, and Boise Cutthroats FC was Ricky Ricardo's submission. That is just amazingly bad and great all at the same time, and throws the name back in. The name I like a whole lot better than the logo. Boise Cutthroats FC for a team name for a lower division team, a much lower division team. And it does play off of the fish, and you can involve the fish branding in it, and they do. They just throw a lot of things in their logo. The name is 500 times better than the logo. So I'm on board with Boise Cutthroats as being one of the best names. The logo is one of the worst logos. It's a bad combination. Ricky also does not care for San Diego Loyal. I don't either. It feels like it's trying too hard. Now, you can sell me with your branding, and you can definitely turn it. I'm not completely writing it off, but it just... I don't have any connection to it yet. I don't have any connection to it yet at all. Cuppers, Alex on Twitter says, I think Wiz wins worst, no contest or discussion needed. It's pretty bad. It was pretty bad. The logo, that was one where I felt like the logo was better than the name. The name was awful. The logo was, it's okay. Share yours with us on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. Use the hashtag Friday Flashback. Going to take a quick break. We'll get into a few more things right after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinski of Apolinski and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back. Soccer Down Here, December 13th. Jason Longshore flying solo with you in hour number 2. John is hopefully staying dry and somewhat warm at Georgia State Stadium. Game 1 of the Georgia High School football State Championships is underway. It is a 2-day marathon of hosting and presenting for our friend John. So Monday, he might not be able to speak out loud or for very long at a time at all, because he's going to do a lot of talking over the next couple of days. One thing that John's missing out on, that I know he was on the same board here with me, and just the lack of respect has blown my mind with this. U.S. Women's National Team Player of the Year is Julie Ertz, which is what it should have been. People did not have Julie Ertz in their World Cup Best 11, which is crazy to me. She, in my opinion, was the most important player for the U.S. women at the World Cup, and was not in the conversation for the Golden Ball. And she was not in the conversation for the Ballon d'Or. And it's just, U.S. Soccer and the media who voted on this got it right. Julie Ertz was the Player of the Year. And this is not just because of her national team performance, although that's a huge chunk of it in a World Cup year. It's getting the Chicago Red Stars to the NWSL final as well. It's the combination of both. Julie Ertz had the best year in U.S. women's soccer, and she gets the award. That's awesome. I'm really glad to see this. And yes, Cuppers is 100% correct. Hashtag Holding Midfielders Appreciation Society. Julie Ertz deserved this, and she plays in a position that doesn't get enough love, and she fulfills a role that doesn't get enough love, because she can drop into the back line too as needed, and we saw that with the U.S. women from time to time. So Julie Ertz is your U.S. Women's National Team Player of the Year. 100% accurate. And I want to make something clear. It's not a knock on Megan Rapinoe at all. Megan Rapinoe won the awards that she won because of scoring goals and being a huge figure for that team, transcending the sport and getting things, like the acclaim with Sports Illustrated and with Time and all of that is awesome, and I love it, and it's completely valid. But Player of the Year or Player of the Tournament for me was not Megan Rapinoe. It was Julie Ertz, and I think the secondary one would be Rose Lavelle. I just think that a lot of Rapinoe's contributions, one, a lot of her goals came from penalties. Two, they were more limited. I think Ertz was more critical to that team. If Julie Ertz is not in that team, I don't think they win the World Cup. I don't think they get to the final. If Rapinoe's not in that team, I think they do. Ertz was the most valuable player in the group, and I think what she did in Chicago puts it over the top, carrying a Chicago team to the final in the NWSL. So Julie Ertz, U.S. Women's National Team Player of the Year, 150% on board with that one. Love it, love it, love it. All right, let's get into more of the Friday flashback and team name discussion. Drew Gano said, I hope they go with a name that does what United did for Atlanta, one that would represent both Carolinas. And Shiva said that would be Carolina United. They're not going to go with another United, that's for sure. That's why all Carolina or Carolina Gliders I was completely okay with. Carolina Gliders especially, I was completely okay with as the name. Because involving both Carolinas, I think, would be a good thing if they can make it work. You have the Carolina Panthers, you have the Charlotte Hornets. It'd be a cool way to do it. Now you're going to have to do it in a different way, which you can. Absolutely. You can involve North and South Carolina and your branding and how you make it work. You couldn't go with another United. That was not going to work. So how else could you do it? I think that's why all Carolina was a possibility, was trying to find another way to say United without saying United. I think Charlottetown is better. I do. Going into some of the worst names in the history books, I think the absolute worst for me in terms of a major professional soccer team in the United States, I'm going to go with the Jacksonville T-Men, because they moved from New England, and it's another one like we talked about with Jess in hour number 1 where they kept their name. So the New England T-Men, okay, you get it. It makes sense. You're playing off the Boston Tea Party. All right, fine. But you moved to Jacksonville, and you stayed the T-Men, and they actually were in Jacksonville. They moved to Jacksonville in 1980. They were the first major professional sports team in Jacksonville, Florida. They played in the North American Soccer League for 3 years, and then they continued on in the American Soccer League and the United Soccer League for another couple of years. So 1980 to 1984, you had the Jacksonville T-Men playing soccer in Jacksonville, Florida, and the name just, no, you can't be the T-Men in Jacksonville. Their owner originally, so this makes it even more sense why they were the New England T-Men, was the tea company Lipton. So there you go. Okay, it works in New England, but Jacksonville? I guess they just wanted to keep all the marketing and slap Jacksonville on the top instead. Now, Lipton did remain the owner, so that has to play into why they didn't want to get rid of the T-Men moniker. But yeah, it didn't really work at all. And then when local owners took over, they just kept it going. I guess Jacksonville T-Men. I wonder if people in Jacksonville still remember their time with the T-Men fondly. I'm going to probably go with no. One that I've always remembered, and I wondered, honestly, if we would see this name come back, and I still don't think it's completely out of the realm of possibility at some point, but probably not for the MLS team in the city. The Chicago Sting is a name that has value in that market. I think it still does. They went on after their North American Soccer League time and played in the MISL for a long time. It's a name that I always remembered as a kid when I was getting into soccer. Cool branding, cool logo, the black and yellow, like it all worked really, really well. And I know there was a movement at one point to launch a USL team under that name. I believe there was even a supporters trust that was trying to do something with it, and it never got far enough to happen. But as we talked about with the Chicago Fire, if they were ever going to rebrand, that would be the name I would go with. And I think it has value still in that area. Other ML or other NASL names that maybe have value, either in terms of rebrands or in terms of new teams or lower division teams starting up. Washington Diplomats was one that was pretty well known. They didn't last all that long, but the Washington Diplomats and the Dips, as they were known, was a name that had some value. We see Tampa Bay Rowdies continuing on. That's one of the good ones. I love that. And I know it can come across hokey, but I think they did everything right around it to sell it. San Diego Sockers is another one that sounds terrible, but it's worked over time because of the way that they've built it out and made it work. One that you might not remember, and I've always wondered if the new USL Championship team would try to do something with it. The Memphis Rogues is an interesting one. I think it was just a fan submission and vote. They had a fight song that had a line, "We're the Ramblin' Rogues from Memphis, the biggest kick in town." Okay, cool. They had an elephant in their logo. It's a pretty cool logo. They went with like a orange and red kind of feel in terms of colors, which is unique. The Rogues only lasted a couple of years. They didn't make it very far, so that name doesn't have a lot of value. But you could do an interesting throwback if you're Memphis 901 with the Rogues and bring the elephant branding back and do something with it. Have some fun. They had one really good indoor season, their only indoor season that they lasted. They played 3 years in the NASL. Sorry, they lost in the NASL Indoor Championship in 1980, and then they went on to go 14-18 in the outdoor season and fold after that. So, team names, you like them, you hate them. Let us know if there's any others that we have not touched on. There's a few other things we need to to get to before we wrap up for the week, though. Ricky Ricardo with a question about the U.S. Open Cup format, and that was announced yesterday, the new format for U.S. Soccer. There's things I really like about it. So here's your Cliff's Notes version of the new format for the Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup. So it's going to start earlier. The first round will be March 24th and 25th. Second round, April 7th and 9th. Third round, April 21st and 23rd. Round of 32, May 19th and 20th. Atlanta United will come into the round of 32. Half of the MLS teams will come into the third round. Second round is where your Division II, your Division III professional teams will enter. First round is your open division teams. I like that they're bringing MLS teams into the tournament earlier. I love that. And I'm cool with the way they divided it, too, because you have the teams that finished higher in the standings and are in CONCACAF who come in later. Cool. Makes total sense. I like that they have included the NISA. So all of your professional teams, if you are considered a professional team in the United States, you are part of the Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup. You come in at the same level. All that's great. I do like that they've created more separation between the rounds. So you can sell it more, you can sell tickets more, you can prepare for these things more. All that's good. ESPN Plus is the home of the Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup again. I do hope that they figure out a way to have local radio. I'm just saying. That'd be nice. Maybe I'm biased. Just a little bit. I don't know how this is going to work, though. And it's because of the first round with the open division teams entering March 24th and March 25th. So your open division teams, for those of you who might not understand the terminology here, this is who is included in this. So your local qualifiers, you've got 12 that went through play-down games in their region to get in. Teams from the southern area, you have Nashville United, which is a long-term club. I think it is connected to the club that started back in the 70s, a local amateur club out of Nashville. If not, then they've just used the same name. There was one that Data Graphic, who played in the National Amateur Cup and Open Cup in the 70s and 80s, played against on a fairly regular basis, called Nashville United. So I hope it's the same one. That'd be very cool. So Nashville United's in. Miami United FC U23 is in. The Louisiana Crew FC is in. North Texas Rayados, a team that we've talked about before, they're in. Our friends up in Maryland, Christos, are in, along with 7 other local qualifiers. Okay. Your National Amateur Cup champion, Newtown Pride out of Connecticut, they're in. Cool. All these teams are teams that participate year-round. They play in local leagues. They're built around local teams. These are the true amateur teams that exist in the country. They play in March. They're fine. No worries. Now, the question is your NPSL and your USL League 2 teams. Their qualifiers are determined on 2019 league results. No problem with that. But these are 2 leagues that overwhelmingly create their roster from college players. Overwhelmingly built on college players. That's why they start in May. That's why in previous years the Open Cup started when it did, because these teams were in the first round and they would, a lot of times, that was the first game they played. The college kids would be able to join the team the week of the first game, maybe a couple days before the first game. But now, how are they going to handle this? Because the Cup.us at US Open Cup points this out, and they're going to have more on the story today. So keep an eye out on at US Open Cup on Twitter. NCAA rules prevent college soccer players from being released to other clubs until May 1st, unless it's during a school vacation. I don't know if they line this up with a school vacation. I'm going to assume not. So March 24th, that's not That's before May 1st. So how are they going to pull this off? Now, I think overall it's better for the tournament in the schedule that they've created now. I think it's better for the professional teams who are, they're going to be the ones that are going to make it to the final rounds. We haven't seen the USL League 2, former PDL, and NPSL teams make deep runs often, a handful of times, but a lot of times it's the amateur teams that are making the runs. It's a Christos. It's a Cal FC. It's not as much of the League 2 and NPSL teams that are making these runs. So you don't want to create the tournament strictly based around that because you're going to limit it. You're not going to make it as strong of a tournament as you'd like to. But now you've basically made it for those teams either to not participate or have to go find players that they normally wouldn't, and you're not playing in a league yet, so you're not going to have games to prepare for. So it's a very awkward situation. The Cup.us, their story actually just went up as we were talking about this, so great timing on the question from Ricky Ricardo. The May 1st situation. So according to NCAA rules, college soccer players are not allowed to compete in a competition outside of their school prior to May 1st. It is 17.19.8.1.1.2, May 1st exception. That's the rule in the NCAA rule book. First off, the NCAA rule book is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. So how are you going to manage this? The Cup.us reached out to several teams for comments. Reading United, which is a team that has been in this tournament many times, they said, "We are extremely frustrated with U.S. Soccer's decision. They are going to lose some of the magic of the Cup by eliminating the U23 segment from participation. Hopefully they will recognize the error of their ways and rethink it for the future." That's Reading United Vice President Art Achenbach. And then he tweeted as well, and it was maybe a little harsher on that. So a U.S. Soccer spokesperson said, and this is from the Open Cup Committee, and we know Stuart Holden is part of the Open Cup Committee. He's asked questions on social media, wanting feedback about the tournament, and he said that they were definitely listening. So, spokesperson for U.S. Soccer said, "Home teams will now have more time to promote and sell tickets. Visiting teams will be able to arrange travel earlier and with more flexibility at lower cost, while those handling broadcast production will be able to make arrangements within a more manageable timeline. While U.S. Soccer recognizes that teams dependent on college players may need to look elsewhere to fill their rosters for Open Cup games in March and April, the committee feels this scheduling step is necessary to drive increased interest in the tournament, help maximize sales for all involved, and ultimately build a more credible competition across the U.S. soccer spectrum." That's very reasonable. I honestly agree with pretty much everything that the spokesperson for U.S. Soccer said. Now, another anonymous person with it has to be an NPSL or USL League 2 team, said, "U.S. Soccer has single-handedly and purposely destroyed the first 3 rounds of the Open Cup. They don't want any more amateur upsets, and that is embarrassing." I'm sorry, I have to completely disagree. You get as many amateur upsets out of a Christos, out of a North Texas Rayados, and out of a Cal FC. Harpos is another one. FC Boulder Harpos is another one out of Colorado that we've seen in the tournament before. The New York Pancyprian Freedoms is another team that's been in this tournament many times. You get upsets out of the traditional amateur teams as often, or maybe more often, and maybe this is just a perception thing for me. I have to go back and do a little research on it. Are these teams who play year-round and qualify through the Open Division local qualifiers, are they pulling more upsets? Are they more successful in this tournament than the U23 teams that are built on college players? I feel like they are without going back to look at it, and maybe that's because of what Cal FC did and what Christos did, and those are the two that are really sticking out to me. North Texas Rayados as well. I disagree with the statement that they don't want any more amateur upsets because you still have amateur teams that are very strong in the tournament. The U23 Summer League amateur setup is very different. And should the tournament be based on those teams that are not year-round? I don't think it should. I'm actually okay with the move. I wish there was a better way to do it. I do want to see how the League 2 and NPSL teams react to this and how they handle it. Do we see some of them do what the Georgia Revolution have done and what some other NPSL, and I don't know if it's happening as much at League 2, but I know it's happening with some NPSL teams, where they have a year-round program and they play in a local league. The Georgia Revolution, their reserve team, and that's why they're branded as such, Georgia Revolution Reserves, entered into the tournament and won a first-round matchup and then went on to play, and I think they were knocked out by Soda City out of Columbia, who I believe was knocked out by Nashville. But they entered the tournament that way as well. Now, their NPSL team, Georgia Revolution, could have qualified on their own through NPSL play, but you could have had a Georgia Revolution Reserves because different teams, different types of competitions, they could have qualified. Amateur teams don't have the same restrictions in terms of being owned by the same entity and entering in a different way. It would have given them the flexibility to field a team in the competition in a couple different formats. Now, I wonder going forward if that changes in terms of, can you have a reserve team of a team that can qualify a different way? Can you do it now that you've changed the format? Because Georgia Revolution, if they qualify either way, if it's the NPSL team that qualified or the reserve team that qualified through the local qualifiers, they could play in March, April, and play because they have a team that exists year-round. Not many of the League 2 and NPSL teams do. But should a national competition be based around teams that exist and play for 3 months? Probably not in the grand scheme of things. I think it has been, but probably not. Western Mass Pioneers of USL League 2, they are a team that should be qualified. Now, those announcements will happen after the first of the year once we know exactly how many teams from NPSL and League 2 qualify. But Brandon Smith, the spokesperson for the Pioneers, said, "It's always a great honor to qualify for the Open Cup. Advancing in the Cup gives us an important opportunity to host home games, potentially with a MLS team. But as a pre-professional organization, we are reliant on elite college players to fill our franchise. An early start for us greatly hurts our chances to advance in the tournament. But we will do our best to recruit players and be competitive." I'm torn because I understand the frustration of the teams that are based around college players, but I do think this is the right format going forward. I do think it will be a good thing going forward for the competition. I do disagree with the idea that they don't want amateur teams to pull upsets because we've seen it from teams that are in the tournament that participate on a year-round basis. So we'll have to wait and see how this plays out. I think the extra time between rounds is really big. I think all the things about promoting it and making it a bigger deal, this will allow you to do that. For the teams that do advance, look, it's tough when you're trying to book travel with a week's notice and you have a long trip ahead of you. If you have a little bit extra time, it just gives you more flexibility for these amateur teams. It allows them to request time off of work, because that's a legitimate issue that these teams face when they have to travel to play in the Open Cup or qualifiers. So it solves some of the problems of the tournament. It creates another one, but I think it creates a problem that is not as big. It's not as important to the overall health of the tournament. And this is not an anti-lower division soccer take at all. It's just a realistic take. The tournament is not going to see an NPSL or a USL League 2 team win it anytime soon. Probably not ever. It's just not realistic. Not with the quality of Major League Soccer anymore. Not with the quality of USL Championship and the improving quality of USL League 1 and the expectations that NISA and NISA have set about what they want to be. Those teams should be beating the amateur teams and the summer league teams. Absolutely. Do you get upsets from time to time? Sure. But upsets from time to time is not winning the tournament. Those are two different conversations. And the tournament is going to be sold and get attention nationally and internationally based off the big teams being involved in it and winning it. The Open Cup final this year was a big deal that you had a big crowd, even though I think it could have been bigger because it hasn't been marketed as well as it should be by U.S. Soccer. I hope that improves. If this is a step in that direction, cool, I will take it. And if it comes at the sacrifice of the summer league teams that are based on college players, I think it's a necessary move that U.S. Soccer has to make to improve the quality of the tournament. Going to take one more break real quick. Any final thoughts? It's last call on the Twitters at Soccer Down Here. Tweet at me. Let me know what you're thinking about on a Friday. Feedback on best team names in American soccer history, worst team names, thoughts on the Open Cup, thoughts on anything else we've talked about all week. Be right back after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service Ad Council and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinski of Apolinski & Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Final segment of the week, SDH, December 13th. All kinds of odds and ends popping up here as we finish up. Stuart Holden shares a tweet about a match being announced. It'll be announced on the U.S. side later today, but the video and graphics already out. United States men's national team headed to the Netherlands to play on March 26th. So that will be during that March international break. It's a good test. I mean, it's a good game. It will be in Eindhoven. It's a good opportunity for Greg Berhalter to prepare for the CONCACAF Nations League semifinals that'll happen in the summer, and to start to prepare for World Cup qualifying that'll start in the fall. So good friendly to book. It'll be a good test of where this team is, and it'll be in a window that you will have your top players. And you would expect to see, if everybody's healthy, Christian Pulisic and Weston McKennie and Tyler Adams and what this team can truly look like. So looking forward to that one. March 26th, U.S. Soccer, maybe it's a little bit late on the announcement, or the Netherlands jumped the gun. I don't know. But March 26th in Eindhoven, Netherlands and the United States facing off in an international friendly. One other bit of news that affects an Atlanta area person. There were new FIFA-level referees announced, And there are 4 new ones from the United States, one from Atlanta. Nick Aranga, who has been working in Major League Soccer for a few years now, he is now a FIFA-level referee, so we could see Nick working in FIFA competitions. Logan Brown joins him on the AR list, and 2 new center referees from the United States on the FIFA side with that FIFA badge, Nima Sagafi and Rubiel Vasquez. Vasquez was one of the finalists for Referee of the Year, and he was my pick. I've been really impressed with Rubiel Vasquez as one of the new up-and-coming referees in this league. I think Nima Sagafi does good work as well. Mark Geiger comes off the list. He didn't work in 2019, but that list came out before he announced his retirement, so he was still on the FIFA list. Aranga, Brown as ARs, Vasquez, and Sagafi as center referees on the FIFA list now. Very cool to see another Georgia referee make the list. Corey Rockwell is one who's been on that FIFA list for a long time and worked many high-profile games. Georgia Tech grad. So Nick Aranga joins Rockwell on the list. All right. Couple other things that have come up here in recent days. There's a couple top 5 lists over at MLSsoccer.com that I wanted to touch on before we wrap up. Beginning of the week, Tom Bogert wrote about the 5 MLS clubs facing the biggest off-season this winter. Chicago was number 1 on his list, and it's not in alphabetical order. I agree on Chicago with the biggest off-season ahead of them, and now they don't get Alan Pulido. They have been linked to a few other players, but they need a bigger splash. Pulido was a pretty big splash. They didn't get him. So where do they go from here? The longer they go without making a splash, the more that big offseason gets bigger and more threatening to their potential success. Philadelphia is also on Bogert's list, and I completely agree with this because you're not bringing Harris Medunjanin back, who was the base of your diamond midfield. How are you going to replace him? Jamiro Montero, we still don't know what's going on with that. That was one of your players in the diamond, so that's 2 of your 4. Marco Fabian didn't really work out. He's gone. Austin Trusty fell out of favor. He's gone. So you need a little more depth at center back. Fafa Pico, one of your speed options, didn't really fit as much into the 4-4-2 diamond. That's not as big of a loss, especially since you added Andrew Wooten as the year went on, who's a better fit for where you are. You're going to have to get a big step up from Brendan Aronson. I think you can. He can play even better. But you've got to replace 2 of your 4 midfielders if you don't bring Montero back. That's not going to be easy. Philadelphia was a team that was in contention last year to be the best in the East. They didn't quite get there. Right now, they look like they're sliding back the wrong way. Portland Timbers on the list. They got to find somebody to score goals. With Ebobisse now injured and likely missing most of preseason, Brian Fernandez no longer with the squad. How they answer that question is going to determine how Portland does next year. Period. It's that simple. They've got to find somebody who can put the ball in the back of the net. And who that's going to be, I don't know at this point. I just don't know. Houston Dynamo on the list. I don't think it's quite as big for Houston in terms of the offseason unless the transfers happen with Manotas and Ellis. Now, if the offers come in and they're too good to pass up and you sell those 2 guys, how are you going to replace them? You've added Darwin Quintero that can be part of that conversation. You have added Christian Ramirez last season, who is going to be part of that conversation. I think Houston can do it, and then how do they reinvest becomes the conversation. And it becomes the big part of that question. So I think they're going to be okay. They need another central midfielder now that Juan David Cabezas is gone after he couldn't stay healthy. They have needs, don't get me wrong, but biggest offseason, I think they've actually answered most of the big questions. This is the one that I think is the biggest, maybe outside of Chicago. New York Red Bulls. No Bradley Wright Phillips, no Luis Robles. They're gone. That's your your heart and soul of your team for the last 5+ years. How do you replace them? You had in previous years, Sasha Kljestan, gone. Dax McCarty, gone. Like, everything that built the Red Bulls into a team that won 3 Supporter Shields, gone. Tyler Adams, gone. Aaron Long, wanting to go. Kamar Lawrence, wanting to go. Michael Murillo, gone. They signed another player from New York Red Bulls, too. That's part of who they are, and that's fine. In a vacuum, that's completely fine. But when you're letting all of these other figures go, and that's so far your signing, for me, this is the biggest season for the New York Red Bulls, the biggest offseason. And if they don't get things done correctly in this offseason, they run the risk of not making the playoffs in 2020. That's how far I think they can fall. And if you are in the Eastern Conference and you are looking at potential teams to jump and knock off, right now I think New England's a better team than the Red Bulls. Orlando is gunning for the playoffs. 100% gunning for the playoffs with the moves they're making. Miami doesn't want to come in and sit back and wait and hope. Columbus, the way they finished, they can be a playoff team. Now, DC is right there with the Red Bulls in terms of wobbly teams that made the playoffs in 2019, but the Red Bulls, as they're currently constructed, if they don't go out and have a big offseason, I do not see them making the playoffs ahead of New England, who finished 1 spot behind them and got in, potentially ahead of Columbus and Orlando. And Miami, we just don't know enough yet, but you know that's the ambition. So the Red Bulls are going to have to do it if they want to stay in the playoffs. If they fall out of the playoffs this year, I mean, we've seen the attendance drop at Red Bull Arena coming off of a Supporter Shield win. What happens after the year they had last year, and if this year doesn't go well? What are the crowds going to look like in New Jersey? That's a big concern. Red Bulls have to get this offseason right. Doesn't mean they have to spend a crazy amount of money, but they have to get the offseason right, or they're going to be in a very bad spot with the Eastern Conference getting better and better and better and better. All right. That's going to do it for the week. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks, everybody, for being part of the show all week. John will be back on Monday if his voice allows. I'll be back on Monday as well. We'll get you caught up on everything from the weekend. Coming up on the network, we've got the Crumpets and Espresso weekend preview. That'll go out later this afternoon. All of the glance around the world of soccer to keep an eye on this weekend. The one for me is a sneak preview will be the Copa Argentina final tonight. River Plate, Marcelo Gallardo tries to win another trophy because the guy just keeps winning trophies. Except for the Libertadores this year, came up a little short. They're playing Central Cordoba. They are the overwhelming favorite. They should win it, but we've seen so many times in this Copa Argentina upsets happen. Can River get it done, and would that maybe be enough for him to consider leaving? He says he's not. I think silly season's going to continue to rage on around River and Boca and the rest of Argentina. So stay tuned. Listen to Crumpets and Espresso later. We'll be back on Monday. Mucha plata, y'all.